It's difficult to give one core idea behind who someone is. And so when we describe God, we have all kinds of words we use to describe him, don't we? Let's see universally, the number one core character of God, shout it out, what you think, in one word, what you think the core character of God is. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh. And everyone's wrong. So love. Come on, who's love? We talk about it all the time. I talk about it a lot. It's actually like number 2 or number 3 in terms of how much it's talked about in Scripture. So if you were to basically take all of this, which is it's not all the writings of God, but it's of people that wrote about God, but it's kind of the core of it, right? And so if you were to take it all and say, well, what's the theme? What do they talk about the most about God, right? When they bring up God and he enters into the conversation of this book, which is like every page, like he is the subject matter. Are y'all following? Everybody say, God is the subject matter of Scripture. If the word Scripture doesn't roll off the tongue, you can say the Bible. God is the character, core. He's talked about on every single page. So, if we look at the themes, every time God's mentioned, what do they talk about? And so, when they're talking about God and they say a character, which ones come up the most often are probably, would anybody say that's probably more than likely the one that's more important? Would you not agree? All of the people of old, what do they describe God as? The word love only comes up in context to God a couple hundred times. But there's this other word, there's this other idea that arises 667 times tied to God in different forms, but the same word. 667. The next closest one is a couple hundred. So this idea of who God is like the fundamental. It was the thing that captivated everybody in the ancient world. This core character of God. In our day and age, we use a term called sacred a lot for that. Sacred. In Scripture, the word that you will see is a 4-letter word, holy. H-O-L-Y. Sometimes, depending on your translation, it'll say sanctified. Sometimes it will say holiness. They're the same word. Holy. Now, real quick, to the person beside you, describe the word holy in just a sentence or two to the person beside you. Same person you just met and had to describe or whatever. Ready? Go. So the term holy. Most of us, when we even say the word, what do we probably think of? We probably think of the stained glass windows and the candles and, very cathedral-ish maybe. Most of you maybe think of a guy in a tie. That's why I wear it. I needed to be more holy today. Some of you may have thought like monks, right? Like they're a holy man. Some of you may have more thought, well, no, it's not like those physical things, but like it means you're like a morally pure person. Like you're really good morally speaking and you're a holy person. As a whole, most of you probably agree with that general notion of that, right? What do we even say? Oh, well, you're just being holier than thou. What does that mean? You're more better than I am because you are more morally pure, or you think you're making a better decision. And so holy for us, or sacred, this idea is purely tied to this general concept in which you are morally pure and acting out properly what needs to be, and like you're more holy, like you got it together, we get it. But that is nothing even remotely close That is such a small fraction of what the word holy means in Scripture. And so when the ancient people that put all this down for us to learn from said who God is, and they said he is holy, they had nothing in mind about that God wears suits and ties, nothing in mind that God sings monkish-like songs, nothing in mind that God really loves candles like Jared, even though I do. And they had nothing in mind of the idea of stained glass cathedrals, and nothing in mind about the idea that God somehow was like just the same, but yet just better. That was not the core idea. And so if we're going to run around and say we know God, we should probably know the core thing he said you need to know about me. The number one thing you need to know about me. And so that's going to be our journey for this. But today, all I want to do, one thing. I want to define this word and see it in context and see what it means to us. How does it change our view? One of the first stories that we see man encounter God and this character is a very, very famous one. It's in Exodus. It's in chapter 3. And there's this guy named Moses, and he ends up at a bush that, what? It's the burning bush. Who's ever heard this story? Yeah, most of us have. Moses and the burning bush. And what is the story of Moses and the burning bush? Moses is out in the middle of the desert, and there's a tree or a bush that is on fire, but yet it's kind of not on fire. And God speaks to Moses and tells him, go to Egypt where you just fled from because you murdered somebody. But go back there, and you're gonna all the people are gonna be set free. Sound back about the basics of the story? Yes. Except for there's a couple wrong things with that picture. Number one, he wasn't in a desert. He was in a wilderness, which does not mean desert. It just means a place where other people were not. But what happens is first off, if you should go read the story. It's kind of funny. Because Moses is out. Put yourself out. Moses is out with a bunch of sheep. He's doing his job, herding, whatever like that. And he sees a bush that seems to be on fire, but yet the bush is not actually burning. And his thought was, I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing. I'm going to go check this out. This is interesting. I don't know about you guys. I'd be like, that's weird. Like, what's happening right now? Now, the reason y'all don't think it's weird is because you've been churchized. But that is weird to be like going towards it. That's kind of like in all the movies when there's something happens and the noise in the dark and everybody's like, let's go see what it is. I've never had that thought. Not one time. Like, never. And so he says, no, I'm going to stop doing it. I'm going to go look at this. Something intrigued him to say, I'm going to go look at this. When he does, as he's coming closer, what happens, everybody? As he's coming closer, he hears a voice calling that says, Moses, Moses, which again, I'm going the other way. But he's like, no, we're going closer. And then when he gets close, what happens? He says, don't worry, I'm not stripping today. Yeah. He goes and the voice says, hey, take off your shoes because this place is holy ground. It is morally pure, better than you ground. The dirt here now has more morality and more right choices than Moses. Do you see how the definition doesn't fit? If you do not, you need to learn grammatical grammar. See, the reason I'm laughing is because I know what's coming. So morally pure ground. No, that definition doesn't work, does it? So we probably need to understand this definition. We see it appear 667 times in Scripture tied to God, this idea. And in this idea, this is the first time man encounters it, and there's something that man must do to be around it, this idea of holy or what have you. But the first time we ever encounter even the word holy in the story is all the way back in Genesis chapter 2. So let's look at Genesis chapter 2 real quick. Genesis chapter 2, the beginning of it, if you want to read, well, let's just read it together just to prove I do know how to flip through a Bible. If you're unfamiliar, if you're flipping through a Bible and you've never physically done it before, there's a table of contents at the beginning. You shouldn't need it for Genesis. It's the very first book in the Bible. And we're going to chapter 2. So that's like roughly, give or take, the second page, for you. And this is what it says. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished. So God's done creating everything. And all the host of them, meaning all the creatures and creations in there. And it says, and on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh from all of his works which he had made. Verse 3. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. That word is the word kadosh, which is holy. And God sanctified it, because in that he had rested from all of his works that he had made. And then it goes on to say, this is the history or the generations of the heavens and the earth. So what did we just read? What we just read was on the final day, creation is done. God looks at it all and says, I'm liking what I'm putting down here. And he says, and he looks at it, and he says, you know what I'm going to do? On this day, we're going to do this thing called rest. We're not going to dive into it, but we're basically going to stop from all the work we were doing, and we're going to kind of enjoy the creation that I'm doing. Like he's basically enjoying his own creation. He's like, this is pretty awesome. And so he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sanctify this day, or holy this day. Again, if you apply your definition of morally pure, good, better than, it doesn't work, does it? I'm going to make this day more morally pure than the prior day. Wait, what? I'm going to make this day more better, and more candles and more singing and more churchy than the prior days. No. So this definition doesn't work. Are y'all following me? So then we have to ask ourselves, what does this sanctified, holy name idea mean? That's what we have to ask ourselves. What does it mean? Well, if you want to sound really, educated, you can say the Hebrew word, which is kadosh. I always think of Kung Fu Panda, skadoosh, but kadosh. It's very similar sounding. So, kadosh. And what it means is this core idea. You could define it as many things. It means to be clean. It means to be appointed. It means to be dedicated, separated, completely set apart. But if you wanted to put it in just one layman's terms, the word kadosh, which we would translate as holy or sanctified or sacred, they're all just variations that kind of point out one aspect or the other. The underlining root thing is that it is an otherness, a separateness, something that is taken and set aside from everything else for one specific reason. That's what it means. So in the story of Moses, when we see Moses and he says, now this is holy ground, what God is saying to Moses is this space, this area, is now dedicated. It is separated from the rest of creation. And it is now placed and has one specific purpose right now. Are y'all catching that? And so in Genesis, we see the same thing when God says the seventh day. What does he say? I'm going to holy it. I'm going to dedicate it. I'm going to separate it from the rest of creation, and I am now going to set it over here very, very different, unlike anything else, and it's going to have one core function, one core attribute, one core thing that it is purposed for. Now, he tells us the seventh day is for rest. And in the story of Moses, we see that the area in which he is now separated, dedicated for this specific purpose and use and goal. Are you seeing this? I told you that if you weren't awake and listening, this was just going to be me talking quite monotonely and defining things, and it was going to mean nothing to you. Which is about what it looks like to you right now, but it's all right. Now, the next thing is this. God gets really, really crazy. Because then God says, in multiple occasions, from Leviticus to Deuteronomy, all the way, Peter writes about it. He says, hey, this is God, that creator that we chose to separate from, the guy who made all this. He says, hey, you be holy because I'm holy. God is holy. And he says, now you're supposed to be it, just like me. And he doesn't say, because it's better for you, and da-da-da-da-da. You know what he does say? Just because of he is, you need to be. Now, the reason that all of you look as dead as a doorknob right now is because you're not liking where this is headed. You may not even understand it, but right now, your natural side and your spiritual side are at odds. Right now. Y'all ever seen Braveheart? I feel like the crazy guy. Yes, Father, I'll tell them. My dad used to do that all the time whenever he was teaching. He's like, God, you got to help me with this. Like he was having a conversation in the back of his mind right now. I feel like doing that right now because I have a lot more fun talking to God than talking to y'all. Yeah. This is going over about as well as I imagined as I was studying it. See, we quote it and we miss it. God said, the sheer fact that I am holy, that I am dedicated, set apart, all this means you should be. Why? Let's go back to Genesis 1. Thank you. Someone's been listening at some point or has read the Bible. Genesis 1. Just go back one more page. And it says, when he created you. Now you're like, I'm not on Genesis 1. Yes, mankind is on Genesis 1 in there. And he says, when he creates mankind, he says, you are going to be in my image and likeness. Means you're going to be fashioned after me. Image. And then likeness, meaning core characters. You're going to have the same characters I'm going to have. Same idea, same characteristics. You're going to have it. And he says, now, with that ability and power, with great power comes great responsibility, Peter Parker. He says, now with that, take this creation I just made and keep going with it. So that's how God's got the guts to say, hey, just because I am this way, you're supposed to be this way. But we have a problem. And most of you are like, I didn't catch a problem with this. Most of you are thinking, well, the problem is we're not. Oh, yeah, that's a big problem. But you want to know why you're not? None of us would call ourselves holy, would we? We would probably look at someone that said they were holy and say, you're an arrogant sucker. Would we not? We would define it that way with our definition of holy, even with the true definition of holy, meaning to be separated, dedicated to a specific thing. We would even say, that's kind of arrogant, isn't it? But yet, here we have God saying that's actually your purpose. Come again? Now, some of you think your purpose is to be arrogant. That is not your purpose. But you say, no, your actual purpose is to be that, to be this holy. But the reason we aren't is because we don't understand how God is holy. How do you mean, Jared? You just told us God is holy. I get it. You know, separate, dedicated. He's not like anyone else in the universe. Yeah, that's part of it. But you have to ask yourself one big question. We have spaces like this sanctuary. And as y'all have been coming in and out, every time you came back in, what are you doing? Praying together as a family, yes? What do we ask every Sunday in this place? Again, I'm looking around and I see home folks. So we say, hey, we're going to keep this space dedicated. If you're going to do something else, go elsewhere with it, right? Why? Because it's a space that we're saying this is all that's going to happen. Yeah. I'm about to take off and hit like fifth gear. I'm going from second to fifth in just a minute because I'm about to get excited. I'm warning you. Trigger warning. Okay? We have these spaces and ideas that are dedicated to one specific thing, right? Who has their own chair in their house? Like, that's my chair. No one says it. My kids do this all the time. Like, that's where Dad sits. I was like, I didn't know we had assigned seats. Well, you always sit there. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't know. Like, right? Then I was told that the reason my seat's breaking is because I'm too heavy, but, you know. It's IKEA furniture, guys. Come on, no. Actually, it was nice furniture. I don't know. But anyways. So, we have these spaces in these ideas, yeah? We have places in our home, we have here, for all a different reason. But yet, we don't understand how God is that at all. The most we get at with it, because again, I'm talking to people who are claiming to be believers, so someone in the back of their head was like, yeah, I get how God is that, because he's unchanging. All right, sure. Half the picture, which is the problem. We look at half the picture of God, are satisfied with it, move on, and can't explain it properly because we are so intellectually lazy with the things of God, spiritually lazy, so consumed with this world that just getting enough to say God's holy, it means he's unchanging maybe, or it means he's good and moral, so you should be good and moral. Yeah. And it's like this is the thing that they were consumed with. In the ancient world, understanding God is holy, kadosh. He is separate. He is very other than anything else. Yes, but he's also different than anything else because he's set aside over here. But it begs a couple of questions, guys. If God created all things, who set God aside for something? Like, how did that happen? Have y'all ever thought about that? And then the next question is, what did he set himself aside for? What did he set himself apart for? Y'all weren't even thinking that until just now. Some of you were just like, I've never thought about that. Some of you were just like, Starbucks just kicked in for a minute, and you're like, right? If to be dedicated and sacred is this idea of appointed for something, who appointed God for what? And then what did he appoint himself for? If he's holy. Yeah? I'm going to say it again because some of you are just now catching the train of thought right now. Don't worry, we're pulling into the station. I'm going to slow down for a minute here. Jump on board. If God says this is my core character, I am holy, I am very, very cleansed. And the idea of cleansed doesn't mean like just like I'm pure. It has that meaning, but it means like I have pushed other things away to go this way. Like I've gotten rid of things. He says, that's what I need you to do. He says, I'm very separate from everything else. I'm very other, you know. Like God's very abnormal if you're not aware of that. He said, I'm very different from everything else. Not only that, I'm very dedicated in this differentness. And there's one specific purpose to it. So how is God constrained? I thought God was not constrained by anything. Right? So who set him apart? How did that happen? And then to what? Because if y'all do agree, right? There's a purpose. Why is that chair your chair? It's probably A, the most comfortable. B, the best viewing angle to the TV. And the wind blows on summer days through this window. And so it's the best. That's Big Bang Theory for some of you who are catching it right now. It's your chair because of all these reasons. Yeah? There's a purpose. This room. The reason we say why? Because there's a purpose. So what? Who set God aside, and then what was the purpose for? Now the train's leaving the station. Follow me. The who was him. He chose to do that. God chose from the beginning to say, I'm going to be this way. And because he said, I am this way, I'm not changing from being this way. This dedicated, separate otherness. To this one specific, set-apart reason. And then God chose the reason. Whoop, there's a table there. I'm breaking furniture up here too. And this is the part that gets crazy. The choice he made in all of his creation was humanity. The choice in all of humanity that he said, I, the being that invented existence, created all things, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be really committed and dedicated to this one specific purpose. So much so that nothing else gains my view and attention to this level. Nothing. He said, and what that thing's going to be is this species that I put in my creation that we call mankind. And he said, I am going to stay set apart for them, dedicated to them. That's what I'm going to do. Now, the reason that was anticlimactic for you is because you don't believe God's real. Jared, yes, I do. I say it all the time. Oh. You want to know why? I don't know how much I believe God's real. Then why are we doing this? Good question. Why are you doing this? See, I'm doing it because I know there's a level of reality to it to me, but I also know that I'm not seeing the full picture here. Because I can't conceive in my own natural life how to dedicate my whole existence to one thing. So how can a being that can be all existence commit to one thing? When the reality of this begins to edge in on your heart, that the reality of there is a being that from the dawn of time created everything you see and do not see. A mind, if you want to call it that. A God, if you want to call it that. A being, if you want to call it that. If you start from there, then start to understand what God we're talking about. And you see, from the beginning when he set out to do it, he said, the whole thing that I'm about is this sacredness, this set apart, dedicated purpose, different, being separated from everything else. For one thing, he said, that's the core of who I am. And I want a being to do that with me. And that kind of a being chose these kinds of beings, us, to do that through. I don't know about you guys, but that seems like a lopsided deal. If you don't find that as a lopsided deal, you have a bigger arrogance problem than I can ever hope. Because you might as well be God, and we'll worship you. Come up here. Some of you are like, this doesn't sound like a bad idea. That is a staggering nature of the character of God. I've used this example a lot, and this is the same. It is the equivalent of God standing at a marriage altar. That is why you have marriage, if you are unaware. The idea of marriage is a spiritual notion. So everyone in this room that is married or is going to be married, it is a spiritual institution founded in the idea of this idea of character, of holiness, of sacredness, of dedicated. It was not a social construct made by man. And I can prove it real quick, so parents, you may have to explain this to children. Because no human being, especially no man, if you want to buy into the whole idea, I'm going through a level of thought process here, you got to keep up with me, okay? Especially the patriarchal man that rules over women in ancient times. There is nothing in a natural mind that says, you know what I want to do? I only want to have one woman sexually for the rest of my life. That sounds like a great idea. Would a natural man think of that? No. Natural men don't think of that because what they think of. I was going to let you use your imagination, but that seems to be dull right now. Okay. They think of every woman that walks by in a swimsuit. Go get a 15-year-old kid and turn them loose in France on the beach. If y'all aren't aware, France is topless beaches. Is this uncomfortable for you guys? You don't see how this ties in? So what is it about man that said, no, the great idea is to commit yourself to one individual in every single way possible? Where did that come from? Came from the idea of understanding who God is. It says, so God gave us that notion and said, this represents, this is a way in this life you can begin to understand me. Then he went to the next step and said, when you two, by the way, do this commitment level to some degree or another, there's going to be something happen from that. We call them children or headaches. It's a universal term. These things are spawned out of it. And then he says, now, when you have those, now you're going to understand me and my other side as a creator. Because you're going to understand my loving affection and desire to see your betterment, which is his second characteristic. And so family is the fundamental spiritual thing to know and experience God through this life. And it is the number one singular thing that we have destroyed, tore up, separate constantly. That is one of the reasons the kids are in here with us during this journey. We were thinking we were going to, send them out and go to their classes. And it was, to us, it was like God just said, why are you going to keep separating my family? We live life separate. You wake up at this time, you go this way, you go this way. Most of us right now, if you have children in your home and a spouse in your home, if there's more than 2 individuals in your home, you can probably count on one hand how many hours in an entire week that you spend as one whole unit. Most of you. Some of you may be getting a better grade than others. 1 hour a night maybe, sitting at the dinner table. I'm not talking about, the whole family together. Then if you take that whole lump sum and say, what were we actually doing with it? It gets real dark, real quick. And then yet we wonder why. We can't understand God. We can't understand why life is the way that it is. It's because the very mechanisms that he's given us to understand him, we are not listening to him. We are doing the same thing as they did in Genesis, saying, I know my way, it's better. I'm not going to do it your way. Now, for all of you that say, well, I don't have a spouse or I don't have kids around, you all have family. You are not an immaculate conception. You didn't just show up one day, come crawling out of the ocean from a single-cell organism with no parents. You've got parents, you've got aunts, you've got uncles. You say, well, they're all living in another state or dead and gone. Well, there's electronics, so you can really be just as close to them in one respect. Or it's almost like there's this society of people that have one core purpose called the church. So don't give me the bull if you think when I start talking about family, you're exempt from this. Because on this journey, we are going to be so aggressive towards reestablishing God's family, the church family, the structure of the family unit. Because this is where understanding the holiness of God is expressed in our lives. And when we start seeing it expressed there, I'm telling you guys, y'all may be thinking I'm up here ranting and raving and sharing a bunch of stuff you already understand. But I am telling you, I'm learning who God is and learning what it means to serve him more through serving my family and seeing them serve me. It is actually showing me who God is. And so most of you's perspective of God is skewed from prior experiences. But I submit to you, quit living off of prior experiences and create new ones that look like him. Quit being a part of the problem and be a part of the solution. And the reason that this doesn't hit and just completely shake our world and get us to a level where you're like, well, Jared was really excited and I don't really know what the heck he was even talking about. He just said things and said the word holy a whole bunch and I don't know. It's because you're not looking at the core character of a being who created all things and said, I don't care about the rest of it, I just care about you. It is as if God is standing at the altar. We understand what the idea of marriage is. And he says, I already said my vows. I do and I will. I'm just waiting on you to agree. I am holy, therefore you be holy. I'm already there. I'm just waiting on you. But you want to know why we don't? And then I'll shut up. Maybe. Because we don't understand his character. We don't get who he is. He's not real to us. I know y'all don't like hearing it, but I'm going to keep saying it. Because I look at my life and I look at my day and I say, wow, the thing that I just said underpinned all reality was not even remotely a part of my thought process and day to day. I was consumed with who was buying Bud Light. I was consumed with that information, and I said this underpinned reality. I said that the fact that this thing even exists is the fact that he exists. I said that the whole way that all of this even came into being is him. But yet I walked through my entire day, maybe even multiple of them. It's not real. And this is where the church is, claiming we have a solution to something that we don't even think is real. It's like the placebo effect in reverse. We think what we have been given is a medicine, is sugar pills. And because we know they're sugar pills, we're not so inclined to tell other people it works. Did y'all catch it? That's where someone goes off to and thinking all about the medicines and stuff. That was just an analogy, because the idea of salvation is a remedy. Or what is a remedy? It's like a medicine. It's the fix to the thing. Don't worry, I'm about to explain this in a minute. That's my final point to you guys. We have got to, now again, before you think I'm edging you to say just go around and hum, I'm going to be so holy because I read my Bible now for 14 hours a day. I have abandoned my children to read the Bible. I didn't go to work today. God's just going to drop money out of the sky. It's going to come through the air vents like in Richie Rich or something. Like, before you go down that line of thought, check yourself before you wreck yourself. That is not what I am talking about when I mean thinking and knowing it's real. Before you think what I'm describing is meaning don't have any fun in life, I'm telling you, I have more fun in my life now than I had whenever before I really started thinking God was real. And I still kind of wonder if I think God is all that real. Now, before y'all think Jared doesn't know if God's real, remember, it's in the context of what I just said. Because of the way I look at how I act, I'm like, I must not think it's all that real. So before you think that means, no, guys, this is for someone else. This is weird. It's for someone right over here. He's the creator. We're supposed to be the most creative people, the most joyous people, and we are the most depressed, the most messed up families. We don't know God. All of the things that we are copying, we're supposed to be the ones that they're copying. We're supposed to invent TikTok. We're supposed to invent. We're supposed to create. The music industry should be looking at us and saying, that is the coolest crap I've ever seen. How did you come up with this? When they look at life, they're supposed to say, whoa, how is life that good? It sucks. Look at all this craziness and Bud Light everywhere. And they're supposed to look at us and say, what is it? You've been told that, haven't you, when you were a child? You're going to shine a light and walk somewhere, and they're going to look at you and just know you're a believer. And we all grow up and say, that is the biggest hunk of bull. Why? Because we don't know the Creator. We're supposed to be the ones pushing this. So before you think what I'm trying to ask you for and what God is asking for is some kind of weird chastisement of joy in life, to where you are like going into, Scarborough Fair is open, like you're walking around with chastity belts on and chains and everything else, and it's just, this is life, suffering for God, and it makes me holy, and one day I'll get in. He says, no, my version of life is the exact opposite of that. But it requires one thing. You gotta be holy, you gotta say, I do like I did. Like God, I'm saying God, not me. Like, don't fashion your life after me, please. He says, I'm standing and saying, I do and I will. And anyone who knows anything about growing up knows that when there is structure given, true freedom comes. He says, I've already said, I do and I will. I'm waiting on your response. But just like with Moses, something happens when you start edging towards the idea of being dedicated and holy, sacred. Something happens. As he came closer, what did God say? Remove your shoes. What is that? Change what you were, where you were going. That's the idea. It's raining outside. Are some of you about to go into your backyard, traipsing through the mud and say, let's go inside. What do you say to your kids when they're outside doing all that? Or at least you should. Take off your shoes. Put that stuff behind you. The key to understanding this idea of sacredness, of holy, dedicated, is understanding the fact that it is parcel and pair together with one core thing, which is sacrifice. Because you cannot say yes to one thing if you're saying really yes without saying no to everything else. It's an impossibility. I am the world's worst at overpromising and under-delivering. I want to say yes to everybody, and my mouth runs faster than my brain can tell it to stop. I say, yes, I'm going to help that and this and that and the other. But I can't stay committed to any of it because why? I didn't say no. Now y'all can quit picking on me and now refer it to your own self. And God says, no, I've said no to everything else. All the other cool things I created, all that beauty that I created, I said no to all of that. I said yes to you, to this creation. That's what I said yes to. And he said, I'm looking for that in return. And that's why I said this is holy ground. This is a space in which only those who come close to me are the ones that say fully yes to me. Those are the only ones. So he says, change. Remove that. Leave that behind and say yes. I've already done it. I'm just waiting on you. And before you go off thinking that you said yes and then you did something bad and now you're kicked way back out here and now you now I got to start all over again. No. I don't unmarry my wife every time I tick her off. She may wish that. No, I'm just kidding. Every time I make her mad, we don't start back over from day one, and now we're not married anymore, and now you better work and earn my affection again. Is that how it works? No. Why would you think that's how God works if he's supposed to be better than you? That's not how it works. It is not your perfection, it is your direction. Because there's something, again, I'm using marriage, A, because it's the best example and it spawns all the other ideas. B, because we need to fix some deadgum marriages. They are not God's marriages. Y'all are either business partners, and that's roughly speaking because businesses... Businesses even share the same bank account. Businesses confer on everything together because if not, you ain't partners together. And we've got jacked up, broke up marriages that don't function anything like the holiness of God. And then all the while telling people, yes, marriage. I love to ask people when they ask me to do their wedding. I'm about to do one in a week. Why are you getting married? Why do you want me to do it? Because if it ain't a spiritual thing and under God, this is just you being friends with benefits with a piece of paper for a tax benefit. And we say this love of commitment is the thing that shows God. God wants to fix our marriage, and I'm telling you this right now. You can call this prophetic too. Some of you may end up divorced by the end of this. That's how hard that God is saying, I'm coming after the family. I want to redeem the family. Because the reason your children and your spouse and everything is going awry is because you are all going awry. You cannot have it both ways. You can't. I would love to sell you the bill of goods. Go down the street and find someone that will. I won't. Because God is showing that to me. Again, why do I say? I'm not saying be up here all the time. That's not having it both ways. That's not what I mean. That's what God asked my family to do, apparently. So we're doing a new building project, and we're building rooms back here because we're just going to sell our house and move here. No. That's what God asked us to do. God is coming because the family structure, the family unit, spousal relationships, parenting, husbands and wives, moms and dads, aunts and uncles, the church, family. He's coming for that and saying, whenever that starts looking like my relationship, Jesus said it this way, they will know you're my disciples, following after me by your love for one another. Love is the second thing of God that we're going to discuss, but it is first founded in this idea of unchanging, unbreaking. I am not moving or shaking from this place. I have committed to you. Mankind, please commit back to me. And he says, when that becomes the thing that drives you together, nothing can break you apart. He takes it further. He takes it beyond marriage and takes it to the people. Can you imagine this? Look around this room and say, how they're going to know that God is real to me, that I understand his core character, is when there's no one in this room that can separate from me. Even people I don't know that are fellow believers, that we are so tied through who he is, that there is nothing that can come between us. And we can come between us because someone didn't shake our hand. Because the time doesn't work out on our midweek service. Or because we had to do a sign up to do discipleship and that just seems weird. Because they put candles out. I'm just using what I called ridiculous things that may actually be real things, but now many of you I've lost 30 minutes ago, and that's fine. And I don't know why I'm teaching so long these days right now. I'll be honest. Because in my head, this was going to take 30 minutes. I'm not condemning you, any person in this room, and saying, I've got it together and you're so horrible. I'm saying this is the view and reality of life that we hold. And God is shaking and calling us. He is asking us to remove our shoes. He is asking us to put those things aside and stay dedicated. Not just in you did a good action today. In the heart and in the mind. And so today, every time you walked in and out, we had you praying together. Which I might add, most of you stayed sitting down, and usually you get up and walk around, but that was not the purpose. I don't particularly care. The idea was that is what dedication looks like. Habit. That is where it's formed, is in habit. And just like as I was teaching, every time someone got up, everybody was so curious as to what was happening. Weren't you? You want to know the crazy thing about that? You already knew what was happening. We told you. But yet we are so easily distracted by anything. And I'm not talking about your attention to me. This was an example that I feel like God showed me. It's like because it's trying to form a habit and trying to understand and keep your eyes focused on what God's trying to do and say, but any little shift and change in movement says, oh, what is that? What's that? Oh, what about that? What about that? Most of you are using the example right now. Squirrel! Now again, if you think right now, it's like, okay, next Sunday we better come in and really just listen to Jared. Don't take your eyes off of him. That's what he was trying to get at. That is not what I'm trying to get at. What I am trying to get at is when you say, I'm going to say I will and I do because that's what God said and that's who he is, I'm believing who he is, I'm going that way, it requires a shift and change in your life. Categoric, not a small one. The cool thing is God says just like we're going to edge that way. I'm not trying to like make it, again, I said this right before we started. Not my way. Like my way is I'm going to get healthy. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to eat anything but baked chicken with no seasoning, and I'm going to drink only water. I've never done this, by the way, because I wake up thinking I'm going to do that, and then there's donuts, so. No, it's saying I'm not saying that God just says immediately everything about you. No, he says keep focused on it. Start with some habits. Start pushing this way. Start becoming sacred, holy, dedicated. Come on, say yes to me. And we're saying yes, yes. But every day that I have stayed married is because every day I have woke up and said, I am married. I shifted my life accordingly to what I just committed to doing. And so he says, it's a growing pattern. I've learned how to be a husband. There are certain things off the cuff you kind of get are the general ideas. But you grow towards it. But as you're doing that, trying to create the habit, there's going to be tons of distractions. And remember, you cannot say yes to one thing without saying no to everything else. And the yes and no with God is the same yes and no he gave from the beginning. Do you want to do it your way? Or do you want to listen to my way? Because I did kind of create this entire thing, and I know what will be great. Again, I got to keep going. Because some of y'all just said, oh, so what Jared's saying is if we fully say yes, commit to all of this stuff, and maybe do everything right, life's going to be perfect. This is not what I just said. I actually said the opposite. Because who in your right mind, who is married? Raise your hand. If you're not married, look, watch, keep your hands up. If you're not married, watch the hands. Is singled easier than married? Put your hands down if singled is easier than married. Anyone with a hand up has not been married very long. Being single is much easier because I ain't got to think about that other person. Not one bit. Because it's just me. And this is the idea. It gets harder in some regards, but yet it gets more peaceful. Because anyone who also knows when you get a marriage going in the right direction, there's something inside of you that says, man, it's been a chaos of a day. But I know when I get home, I've got someone to confide in. Now, if you're saying that's not how my marriage works, it's not God's marriage, so fix it. And he gave us that to see it. Y'all think I'm teaching marriage counseling? I'm not. I'm trying to show you that's what God is. And there is a resistance in the hearts of people right now. There's a resistance in you. And God's not going to let up. When I said there could end up in divorce at the end of this, that's what I mean. Stop being resistant. If you love your rebellion so much, the world has plenty to rebel against. God should not be among that list. And so the call that God has said is, I am holy, unwavering, unchanging, set aside for a purpose. I chose you for that purpose. He could have chose anything, and on multiple occasions could have just said, no, I'm done now. But he has not and will not. That's his character. And he says, now be that character. Be that character back to me. Be that character back to me. And then you can show that character to the rest. And as we jump through the rest of this journey, we're going to look at all the various ways of these ideas of sacred, holy, dedicated concepts and ideas. From acts of worship that we do that we have no clue why we do them. We just do them. To thought processes that we hold. To mannerisms we do lie. Diving in for the next 8 weeks into this core character idea of God. And it can revolutionize the way we look at the gospel message of who Christ is and who God is. It can revolutionize the way that we do life. But I do tell you that if you are uninterested in this journey to know God, if you're uninterested in a changed life, a renewed heart, if you are uninterested in the actual antidote to this chaos, you don't come back next week. Not because we don't love you, but if you're uninterested, let's just hang out elsewhere, because this is a dedicated space to say we want renewed hearts. It's what we all come together to do, is it not? Is to categorically look at ourselves and know there is something missing and broken, and I know what it is, and I'm going to go restore myself. I'm going to do it all week long, and I'm going to get together with a bunch of other broken people, and somehow or another we're actually whole. Isn't that the biggest paradox? God says, with a bunch of broken things together, I make you all whole. So when I say don't come back next week, I ain't saying because you're not good enough. I ain't saying because of that. I am saying because if you don't want to be made whole and you think you're already whole, what do you need Him for? What do you need this for? What do you need us for? You don't. And so I just taught 9 weeks in one message right there. And so then over the next 9 weeks, we're going to hone in and expose. And if it doesn't get your heart pumping, maybe not physically, because some of you aren't as, I'm crazy, I get it, If it doesn't put your view to say, this is who God is, I ask you to meditate on it. Play it over and over and over and over and over again in your mind. I ask you to say, then I must not be seeing God. I'm telling you, if it's not, you're not seeing what I'm seeing, just period. And so just go back and start looking at it again and again and again and again.